Robinson's Red Mars, as much as any other novel we read this semester, takes science very seriously, does its best to get the science right, to the degree that getting Mars to be habitable turns out to be much, much harder than life on any other planet anytime we read. You thought Gethin was cold in The Left Hand of Darkness. Yeah, that's cold. That's Arctic cold. You have to be a kind of like genderqueer space Eskimo to really cope with it. But Mars is in fact much, much colder than Gethin. Mars is much, much colder, much more inimical to life than any planet that we routinely see in most science fiction. It's hard. And here, Red Mars is 572 pages, mostly of putting in the hard work, and it's not even inhabitable on the surface yet. This novel is very much up to date on the science of when it was written in 92, published in 93. It is sometimes doing very slight hand waves, like assuming a new technology that we're not quite sure how that works, which a lot of science fiction does, jumping ahead to the next thing. But is actually really working, being grounded in the science. Two other things. All of its characters are scientists on one level or another. Even people like Boone and Chalmers, who are, politically oriented astronauts slash politicians, they're still engineers. They are still scientists. They still think in a scientific way. And you will notice all of these scientist viewpoint characters tend to think in scientific metaphors. Robinson himself was educated as a humanist. He has a doctorate in English from the University of California at Davis. What did he write his dissertation on? Philip K. Dick. But his characters are scientists, and they tend to think, even Michelle, in metaphors of science. So at one point, Frank looks at Maya's smile and thinks about the amount of information density in that smile, not the radiance. One thing this does is keeps you out of certain cliches. A lot of literature, including a lot of science fiction, leaves those scientific metaphors alone and goes for other kind of more traditional metaphors and similes. Robinson's getting his literary mileage, his figurative mileage from the science, and the characters think that way, and he uses science as a metaphor all the time. Let me close read a few examples just from the first 20 pages of this novel. So Frank, our friend Frank, is in his plot to murder Boone, and in that is hidden a plot to kind of murder the assassin he has sicked on Boone by poisoning him with a bunch of pesticides he's found in the garden. On page 13 or 14, we see Frank in the garden, in the farm area of Nicosia, this new Martian city, and he's picking out a bunch of pesticides. He's a scientist, and through experiment, he's found a combination which is poisonous to animals. And I point out here, this is how this metaphor works. It's got to be a combination. He didn't find a pesticide that is poisonous to animals. He found a group that if you combine them together will kill a person or another mammal. On page 16, on page 17, near the bottom, he slaps it onto the assassin's back. "Sell him," Frank called, quietly sweating. He reached into his jumper pocket, carefully felt in the bag, and palmed the trio of stem patches. It's a trio. That combination is poisonous is now a trio. Synergy could be so powerful, for good or for ill. I want to stop and look at the very deep metaphorical resonance embedded there. Chalmers has found a trio of pesticides that work together, a threesome. These three together are deadly. Threes are on his mind. He's in a love triangle that seems to be one of his primary motivations. It's actually not clear in this section whether he's killing Boone in order to kind of take over, and the last sentence of the section is now we'll see what he can do with this world. If he's killing him out of rivalry for leadership of the future of Mars or over romantic rivalry over Maya, it's clearly both. It's clearly all of both. But he is nonetheless, Chalmers is nonetheless cathected on the three of them. He actually has a conversation with Maya where he's hoping that Maya will say something that will make him run across the city to save his old friend Boone. His old friend Boone. This is a very complicated triangular relationship. We need Michel Duval to kind of sort out all the relationships in that triangle. But he's found a trio that, and he reflects synergy could be so powerful for good or ill. There are combinations of three that are murderous, combinations of three where the synergy is fantastic. What I suspect Chalmers is thinking of there is the fact that, the three of them together might have been a healthier version of Mars. Am I being too optimistic? Let's turn back to page 8. At a moment where Chalmers is being devoured by his jealousy over John and Maya, he stops to look at the new kind of tenting material. And again, Robinson's done his homework. This is a theoretical, a kind of speculative technology, but not a crazy one. It's a piezoelectric clear tenting where it's taking electricity from the wind. Frank reached out and pushed at the inner membrane. It stretched until his fingers were buried to the knuckles, slightly cool. There was a faint white lettering printed on the plastic, Isidus Planitia Polymers. Through the sycamores over his shoulder, he could still see the platform at the apex. John and Maya and their cluster of terran admirers were still there, talking animatedly, conducting the business of the planet, deciding the fate of Mars. He stopped breathing. He felt the pressure of his molars squeezing together. He poked the tent wall so hard that he pushed out the outmost membrane, which meant some of his anger would be captured and stored as electricity in the town's grid. Polyvinylidene difluoride was a special polymer in that respect. Carbon atoms were linked to hydrogen and fluorine atoms in such a way that the resulting substance was even more piezoelectric than quartz. Change one element of the three, however, and everything shifted. Change one element of the three and everything shifted. Here there doesn't seem to be an obvious relationship between the sexual jealousy and the anger and rage, the kind of teeth-grinding, lose-his-breath rage that Frank is experiencing, and the kind of technical information about what the tent is made out of. What the tent is made out of is something, a special chemical, built of three particular molecules that have to be in exactly that combination of three, and if you change one, you lose all the potency. That metaphor is working too. Did I notice that the first time through? Hell no. I noticed this last week, but it's there. And we should be alert to exactly these kind of very subtle scientific metaphors all the way through the novel.